New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani and AOC rallied yesterday in New York. Let's roll some of this.
To everyone who pulls me aside to whisper with the best intentions, you have already won. I am sorry, but the days of moral victories are over. And as my father told me years ago, when the right wins power, the left writes a great book. Those days are over too. Because this is a campaign that is going to win on June 24th.
For so long, we have had political leadership, including in the Democratic Party, that has just wanted to play it safe, that has just wanted to be neutral, where so many people are motivated by their own individual political careers. And I cannot tell you how shocked I have been to see so many of the individuals who called on Andrew Cuomo to resign in disgrace after so many details of harassment against women. And for those same people who called on him to resign, to stand behind him and endorse him for mayor of New York City, they still decided to throw all of their weight behind Andrew Cuomo. And I want to be clear about the message that sends. When they do that, free Palestine as well.
All right, joining us now to discuss the rally is independent reporter who was at it. He runs a Substack, The Metropolitan Review. He's also a columnist at New York Magazine, Ross Barkan. Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm excited to be on.
So I don't know if I've ever heard a New York City mayoral audience with that kind of volume. Typically you're looking at a couple dozen or maybe a couple hundred people coming out to a New York City mayoral rally.
I guess you've never been to one of those Bloomberg rallies.
That's
one of
true.
Those famous Bloomberg rallies.
For the Bloomberg rallies. So Ross, how big was this and what was the energy like?
Quite big. So it filled Terminal 5, which is a sizable music venue in Manhattan. At least 3,000 people were there. And it's the sort of event that probably if the venue had more capacity, they could have more. So incredibly high energy, very crowded, much more like a presidential campaign event than something for mayor. There have been rallies for mayor before that brought people in, but I would say of this scale, certainly I've never attended. I've covered mayoral races since 2013. I have not attended a rally like this one. He also had a fairly big one about a month ago, a little bit more, about 1,000 people. This was larger. This was with AOC. So undoubtedly, the crowds are there for him. As we know, that's not everything. Doesn't mean you'll win. But the energy for this campaign is like nothing that I have seen in New York City in recent years, at least.
And Ross, you wrote a piece on your Substack just called Life with Zohran that published recently, and folks should go read it at rosselliotbarkan.com and on your Substack. But could you tell us, I'm curious particularly about what you observed in terms of just name recognition and how engaged people are in this particular election. You mentioned it's not like what you've seen in the past. I'm curious, as you spent time with Zohran Mamdani, like, are people really plugging into the race? Are people, connecting the dots and saying, okay, that guy's the guy who's running for mayor, and this is what he believes in? What did you just notice as he was out campaigning?
Well, in general, the engagement has gone up a lot in the last few weeks. It was a pretty sleepy mayoral race for many months. Cuomo had a very large lead. Cuomo was barely campaigning. The other candidates were struggling to gain traction. Zohran's polling really started to surge, or I'd say move in a real way in March. But really, in the last few weeks, his name recognition has increased by a lot, and he is now very well known in New York City, perhaps on the scale of Cuomo now. I mean, Cuomo enjoys universal name recognition, having been governor, having resigned. Everyone knows, there's no one who doesn't have an idea of who Andrew Cuomo is. But Zohran is getting there, or he's there already. It's remarkable, and especially if you go break it down generationally, I'd say almost any voter now under 50 years old who's not an Orthodox Jew is coming out hard for Zohran. Older voters much more skeptical. So there's a real generational divide happening right now. And it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out, because New York City, in one hand, is a place where older voters traditionally in Democratic primaries dominate. They are more reliable, they show up. There also is just a growing cohort of younger voters in the city, college educated voters, people who are engaging more with local politics than they used to. So that will be very fascinating as we're now in the home stretch under a week. There's definitely a lot of energy and interest in this race, which I would say less so a few weeks back.
It feels like if Cuomo is going to eke out this victory, it's going to be because the attack ads on Zohran land and reverse the momentum that we've seen since March. If you look at his kind of climb in the polls, and you look at the trajectory, and you look at the date, the time of the election, like he's headed to eclipse Cuomo unless something changes. Are the attacks landing, and does Cuomo have the ability to get those attacks in front of voters who would then absorb them and decide that actually, after all, they will rank Cuomo?
I would say that I'm a little less optimistic on the Zohran trajectory than you. I don't know if he's on track to win, even without the onslaught of negative advertising, just because no independent polls actually showed him ahead. Today, Marist poll came out. The race has shrunk dramatically since May. So Marist in May showed Cuomo up 24 points on Zohran after RCV. Of course, this primary's RCV can vote up to 5 candidates. People get eliminated, and you end up with a winner when they hit 50%. So Zohran has gone from down 24 to down 10 in Marist. Most polls show similar movement. He's moving towards Cuomo, no doubt. It's getting very close. No poll is yet to show him on top. Right. I do think so. What the negative ads do, they're everywhere, they're ubiquitous. So I myself, other people, my mom have gotten many anti-Zohran mailers. There's been mail coming in, TV, it's a constant. There's a Cuomo super PAC that's probably going to have more than $20 million when this race is over, that has been blanketing the airwaves nonstop now. Used to be pro-Cuomo ads, and now it's pivoted in the last few weeks, just purely anti-Zohran. So you've got that. The New York Times came out very strongly against Zohran. They issued a non-endorsement in the race, but made some very cutting remarks about him and his experience. That will be turned into an ad. So there's no doubt this negative campaign is something that Zohran will have to overcome. It's going to be a big challenge for him. These candidates are so different. It's also hard to say what if, because literally you've never seen a mayoral race, at least in our lifetimes, where the top two candidates just are so diametrically opposed ideologically and have such different life experiences. Someone who's been in government for decades, who's been governor of the state, the most powerful person in New York State, versus a 33-year-old state assemblyman. One's an avowed socialist. One is from very much the center of the Democratic Party, even somewhat conservative, depending on how he feels. One is very scandal scarred. One has no scandals. So different, right? And that's what makes this race really interesting. The undecided voter here cannot be undecided for too long. Maybe they won't choose either candidate and will rank someone else. But you've got stark choices in a way you don't typically see in almost any election, I would say, even beyond New York City.
And it's sort of the perfect race for both of you guys, having written like actual books about the left, and it tests a lot of what you guys have covered. And so I'm curious, Ross, as Zohran has been pitching this, I think, strain of democratic socialism in a very kitchen table type of way, and in a way that doesn't often get a lot of play in like mainstream democratic politics. And Cuomo then, on the other hand, is like the perfect foil for all of the reasons you just listed. So how do you think going forward, let's just say beyond actually this election, and obviously that this will change if Zohran Mamdani wins. I mean, it gets even more powerful. But how has he tested out that pitch for that version of sort of democratic socialism as a foil to establishment democratic politics, saying like this actually can work. You can get average voters on board with Bernieism, what people think of as that strain. What's that been like?
Well, he's definitely taken the sewer socialist tact. Once upon a time, there were socialist mayors of big cities like Milwaukee, and they were really focused on local issues and kind of making government run better and providing goods and services and sort of building a social safety net. So you look at the planks of his campaign, it's freeze the rent on rent stabilized apartments. It's making buses faster and free, universal child care. He wants 5 city-run grocery stores, which are actually not all that ambitious. I always get very amused when people are like, "This is communism." Like, well, the city can't run 5 supermarkets, and we have a lot more problems. The New York City runs a million kid Department of Education and a massive police force. So his actual campaign is not the kind of like Green New Deal massive upheaval that candidates for federal office will pitch, right? There's no Medicare for all pitch here. You can't do it. So that's very interesting, and it's been successful. I mean, I think Zohran, at the very minimum, offers a blueprint for leftist campaigns going forward, which is you focus on economics, you focus on bread and butter. Zohran is very smart, he's very savvy, so he knows this. There's also the element of Palestine politics, of Israel-Palestine, since Zohran is Muslim, and he is used to certainly identify as an anti-Zionist. He's still pro-BDS. So, his views on foreign policy have become a big part of this race too. Though I will say he himself is not really running on that. You don't go to his website and find I support BDS. It comes up, and he's honest about what he believes in. But he's really pushed it into this economic lane. And I think this race is really important for the left because it's the biggest left-wing campaign since Bernie Sanders. New York City is a huge city. There are going to be 1 million Democrats voting in this primary, probably at least. So you're talking about this is a statewide race. This is like a governor's race in most states. So he is running the sort of race you've not seen from any leftist candidate since Bernie running for president. And it's on a scale far greater than AOC, not to take anything away from her, but she won in 1 congressional district in Queens and the Bronx. You're talking, I don't even know how many voters voted in that primary, maybe 40,000. Yeah. So he's just operating on a huge, the money being spent, the amount of volunteers, the whole machine of it is just so much bigger. So win or lose, that is really interesting. There's not been any campaign like this in any city, really, especially since Zohran started from zero. That's important. It's not so much like a Brandon Johnson thing in Chicago, who is very close to the teachers union. You really had a lot of institutions kind of bringing him up, and that was also an interesting race. Zohran, state assemblyman for 4 years, polling at 0%. He built this from scratch and with the help of DSA, but he really bootstrapped it, and it became this massive thing very quickly.
To get a sense of what polls say voters are concerned about when it comes to Zohran, you can probably look at the attack ads, because these super PACs that have $20 million to spend, they don't just guess at what ads are going to resonate with voters. They test these, very deeply, and then they go with the ones that they think are going to work the best. My own gut, without testing it, is the New York Times one about lack of experience and those other digs.
Absolutely.
That's going to
be hurt him.
That's
Definitely.
that's huge. Like that's gonna crush, because you can say the New York Times says this about this guy, and for people who are following casually, be like, oh well, New York Times, that's a pretty credible newspaper. If they say that, I can't rank him. What else are the negative ads hitting him on, for a sense of what the left's vulnerabilities are?
He's been getting hit on defund the police. Zohran did support defunding the police, not running on that in this campaign. Notably, has talked about hiring additional social workers to handle some mental health situations, but has not called for any NYPD budget cuts at all. But he's on the record supporting defund, so he's been getting hit very hard on that. Raising taxes, which I actually don't think will be all that effective, because he wants to raise the corporate tax rate to something that the state actually needs to do. The city itself can't do that. It needs state approval. But I don't think that's really unpopular. So I'm a bit skeptical that almost seems like, the Cuomo, the very wealthy Cuomo super PAC backers are telling you got to do something on the taxes. I think defund certainly that still can hurt. I think Cuomo's message is effective in that he's not experienced. So you can say to the average voter, listen, do you want to hand the city over to a 33-year-old state legislator? Like you take away all the ideology, you can call him radical. Since he's also he's a socialist, he's Muslim, so it's all the things you accused Obama of. He literally is these things. He's proud of it. So certainly you can move in that direction. You're seeing kind of dog whistling that way. But I would say the primary attacks are kind of what the New York Times said, versions of that. This guy is flimsy. He's weak. He has no experience. He's not serious. He's a playboy. It's that kind of framing. And Cuomo's the serious old man who's going to come in, straighten everything out. He's the tough guy. For a lot of liberals who are thinking about how to stand up to Trump, they think Cuomo, well, he's a bully. Maybe he's thuggish, but we need a bully and someone thuggish who's also from Queens to combat Donald Trump. So that has been the framing. I think the most effective attacks are probably on his experience, because you can't spin around that. I mean, he's young. I mean, he's very young. There's not been a mayor this young of New York City in literally over 100 years. So that's just the fact. It's going to come down to what do voters think. Also, how many voters leave Cuomo off their ballots? How many leave Zohran off their ballots? Each side has had a very concerted push to do this. Cuomo has leaned very hard of late into the Orthodox Jewish community, which actually doesn't like him all that much anymore, though he's extremely pro-Israel. Because of COVID, he imposed these lockdowns on Orthodox Jewish neighborhoods in 2020. There's a lot of bitterness over that. So of late, I've been seeing a lot of videos from rabbis basically telling their communities, I know you dislike Cuomo. I know you'd rather vote for Eric Adams. Eric Adams is not in this primary. You can vote for him later. We've got to stop Zohran. Zohran is an existential threat. So there's a lot of that rhetoric too. As a Muslim who's critical of Israel, there's been a lot of talk of how he can be terrible for the Jews. He can hurt the Jews. And that's also become an attack line in the final week.
All right, Ross, last question. Give us your prediction.
Oh gosh, I don't love predictions. I think Cuomo's the favorite. I think he has the slight edge. I think there won't be a lot of clarity on election night necessarily, because you'll see an election night is the first place vote. So if Cuomo's up 7 points, let's say, you're then going to have to run the RCV calculation, which the way the Board of Elections does it, it can take some time, I think at least a week. So if you remember 4 years ago, Eric Adams, I think, finished in first place with around 30%. Catherine Garcia, who was the runner-up, was around 2021. After RCV, she lost by less than 10,000 votes. It was literally almost 50-50. So my prediction is it's going to be very close. And also watch the general election. General election is typically very sleepy in New York City. Not so here. Eric Adams, the once indicted beleaguered mayor, is running as independent, probably cannot win. Andrew Cuomo has an independent party ballot line. He can run in the general election. Zohran could take the Working Families Party line. He could run the general election. There's also a Republican candidate as well who will get probably like just under 30%. So my prediction is you could have a very topsy-turvy general depending on what happens. And this race is going to get close. And election night will be fascinating, one way or the other. If someone's up, if someone's down, I expect the margins to not be very big, and I expect us to have to wait to see how the RCV votes shake out. And then from there, decisions will get made, right? If Zohran wins by, I'm making up a number, 20,000 votes after RCV, Andrew Cuomo is going to say, well, I'm going to run in the general and beat him. If Zohran loses by 10 to 20,000 votes, 50,000 votes, there will be pressure on him to run again, because then the general election will be Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, Curtis Sliwa. Progressives in the city will be like, these are all bad options. So
would he have a
lot
ballot?
will happen. No hard predictions, but just look out for all of that.
Wow.
If Zohran loses, would he have a ballot line anywhere?
Yeah, the Working
has
Families
a WFP?
Party can give him. They can give him the ballot line. They can choose to give it to him. So he will have that option. Cuomo created his own ballot line. Eric Adams created his
the
own
Women's
ballot
Party
line.
or something, right?
Yeah, it is stupid. They have like stupid names. I think Adams like Stop Anti-Semitism or something.
Support women. Yeah.
So yes, help all women. So they all have that option. So the general election is potentially very interesting. Now, if one candidate wins by a lot, gets the Democratic nomination, game over. But if it's close enough, each side will feel pressure to continue onward.
That's last question briefly, because we had Brad Lander on the show earlier today, and he had that big arrest yesterday. He's endorsed Zohran. How does that play in?
I think it's good. It's good for Zohran. He needs Brad Lander votes. Brad Lander right now is in the third place. It's kind of a distant third, but he's got a base. He is a technocratic progressive. So there are people who like Brad Lander who want him to be mayor, but they aren't sure about Zohran because of his inexperience. So for Brad Lander to endorse him, I do think brings along some voters who will now put Zohran on their ballots. Does it help Brad Lander? I think to an extent, yes. There's going to be a Zohran surge, and there's going to be people putting Brad Lander on the ballots, so he'll go deeper into the RCV rounds. So I think it's mutually beneficial. I don't know if it helps Brad Lander get over the hump. I mean, one challenge for Zohran in this race is the other candidates haven't performed that well. Cuomo has really been far ahead of all of them, and Zohran has ran to catch up. But third, fourth, fifth place, they're way, way behind. Right. Zohran might be in better position right now if someone like a Brad Lander or Scott Stringer, Adrian Adams had really moved into a better pole position. But they really have not. So it's become a two-horse race, and that's where you get the polarization, the extremely negative attacks, and the possibility of either Zohran pushing past Cuomo or Cuomo kind of beating him back at the last minute.
All right, fascinating stuff. Ross Barkan, the Metropolitan Review, columnist for New York Magazine. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.